Hello, you're watching us here on CredAvenue Presents Unlock Growth. That is what we're talking about today. After the budget was announced, and there was a specific capex push that was made by the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman. The overall capex budget this time around 7.5 lakh crores. This compares with 5.54 lakh crores the same time last year. And we have with us an extremely knowledgeable expert out here. Shubham Jain joins in from CredAvenue. He will give us a sense of what this budget can actually do in terms of unlocking growth, unlocking credit for us. Thank you so much, Shubham, for joining in. It's indeed an honor having you here.
Yeah, thanks, Mangalam, for having me, and it's indeed a pleasure to be conversing with you and the viewers here. So definitely, as you have put it very rightly, this budget has really shown us the path of infrastructure-led growth. So if you go back 2 years, NIP was launched somewhere in mid of 2020. But unfortunately, because of COVID and government's focus more on the welfare and the social schemes, the adequate allocation towards infrastructure couldn't be done at that time. So NIP, which itself is around 150 odd trillion rupees to be executed in a 6 or 7 year period. So that means you have to spend around 22 trillions every year. But if we see in the past, maybe on an average, we were spending just 10 trillion rupees. So this year was the first year where center's budget allocation itself is 7.5 trillion rupees, in addition to IEPR of maybe 4 odd trillion rupees, which various CPSCs will do. And then the push to the states, where they have also relaxed their borrowing capability from 3% to 4% and giving them 50-year long-term loan, interest-free loan of 1 lakh crores. So these are all enablers which have definitely shown a very strong intention from the government that yes, they are serious about NIP. They are serious about bridging this large infrastructure gap that the country has been facing. And that's why they are enabling to go all the engines full throttle, whether it's center, states, CPSCs, or the private parties also, to start and investing heavily in the capex-driven sectors and building the infrastructure for the country.
Shubham, what you say makes absolute sense, and this is something that we've been tracking over the last many years as well. The fact that we do need some sort of investment in infrastructure where we have seen a fair amount of shortfall. But another problem from the demand side has been that we've seen a serious amount of lack of absorption of these funds as well. Do you think anything specific in this budget stands out which can solve that problem?
See, definitely, I think, yes, we have pipeline of large number of projects. We have long list of projects which one wants to do. But the gap between having them on paper, the planning, and actually making them shovel ready, the gap in our country is just too wide. It takes as much as 3 to 4 years. That is why we are seeing significant lag between when we are just putting something on paper and actually starting working on that, and when you actually see the absorption of that funding which is available from the lenders or from the government side. Now, I think government has also taken a very close look at it, and if we see this budget, the highest allocation is towards the road sector. In fact,
Hmm.
North itself has got 1.84 trillion rupees, highest ever and highest ever to any ministry, and reducing the dependence on debt also. Because if we look at last 4 5 years, they have done a good job of acquiring land, which are required for their Bharatmala program. So now I think they will go very aggressive on awarding the projects so that whatever allocation and this large allocation has been done can be absorbed and spent very well on this segment. In the meantime, possibly what they will do similar things for other segments, possibly on the port side, or they will also make such projects in the railway side so that they again get ready, and possibly in the subsequent years in FY 24 25 we will see similar kind of action happening in those segments.
But we've seen lenders' experiences with a lot of these players in the infra space. We have had high delinquencies. A lot of them ended up in the NCLT, etc. as well. How charged up do you think will they be now to participate in this journey of growth when they're forced to go ahead and lend once again? I mean, it's just now that we, came out of a bad credit cycle, if you must.
Definitely, I think a very valid point, Manglam. So yes, from lenders, they have really faced a lot over the last decade or so. If we go back to the infra cycle of 2009 to 12, when there was a very aggressive bidding in all PPP projects, whether roads, airports, ports, and we saw a lot of failures happening. In fact, we were trying to do some analysis that the earlier developers, the players, I won't name them, but very, very large developers, uh, almost 80% of them are currently in NCLT because all of them had bidded very aggressively. All of them had taken debt to fund equity. So there was multiple leveraging which was in the system without any real equity in the system. And the projections were very, very rosy in terms of traffic growth, in terms of power generation, tariffs, etc., everything. And which led to like huge losses to the lenders, which led to huge losses to the public at large. And RBI also did a lot of work in cleaning up that NPMS. So if you see for infra, which was the largest contributor of NPAs, I think almost 35%, which it was contributing in 2015. Now it has come down to 18%, not
Hmm.
because of recoveries happening, but because of a lot of cleaning up, which has been pushed by RBI. Now, one big difference which you will see in the current cycle is all the developers are very cognizant of their balance sheet.
Yeah.
They don't want to go very debt heavy. They are raising equity at every point. Whenever they get an opportunity, they are raising equity. And there is a very vibrant M&A market also. So
Hmm.
people are not sitting on assets once they become operational. So that is also a good thing, which is helping the country, that we have very large players like CPPIB or a Macquarie or a Brookfield who is very, very active in operational project stage.
Right.
So once it becomes operational, it is flipped to these long-term investors and the capital is recycled. So if you compare the earlier cycle vis-a-vis this cycle, I think lessons have been learned. Everyone is very cautious and trying not to repeat the same mistake. But as one says, yes, we have a poor memory. So fingers crossed that we should not repeat the similar mistakes.
So they say history doesn't repeat, it rhymes. So let's see. Let's hope this time around it doesn't rhyme. Shubham, one thing that I wanted to know about is Gati Shakti. There was a fair amount of, what do you say, teaser given by the government that, okay, this is something that we're planning to launch. How much do we really know about it? What could this really do? I mean, how big a game changer could it be, if at all it would be a game changer?
Yes, again, the information in public domain is very limited.
Hmm.
So possibly we would have heard the same things as you would have heard. But what our understanding here is that government is trying to bring in a lot of synchronization and coordination amongst various ministries, whether it's state or center, because currently a lot of the projects, instead of complementing each other, are competing with each other, which
Right.
is becoming a challenge for lenders, which is becoming a challenge for equity investors, and which is becoming a challenge for all the stakeholders. Now, just to give you an example, you may have seen, like possibly in your locality, a new road has got just laid, and after
Hmm.
4 days, the other authorities are coming up and digging it up to lay possibly optical fiber or something else.
Right.
Why it is happening? Because there is no coordination. No one knows that when is the road is getting laid and when the cable has to be put in under the ground. So everyone has been operating in silos. Now, what Gati Shakti is trying to do? Okay, let's bring everyone on the same page, on the same portal, so that if I am controlling an authority, I know that if I have to work on in a certain region, certain area, what are other people planning to do in the same region, so that it can be a more synchronized effort. So what we are hearing that by March 2022, even all the state authorities will get on board on this Gati Shakti platform, and possibly by August or later part of this year, government will also may open up this for the private stakeholders, so that they can take more maybe good investment decisions, whether a lender or a equity shareholder. Like, again, just an example, if I'm investing in a road for 15 years, I should be aware that, okay, in the next 15 years, which are the parallel tracks which may come in,
Right.
not only road, possibly a rail, DFCC, which can
Hmm.
also compete with my road. So if I have all this information upfront, it can really help in making better investment decisions.
So I'm surprised. Why did it take so long then for one to, actually formulate something like this, which is so intuitive to you and me as commoners, where we wonder that why is it that another authority has come and dug up this road, which was dug up by another authority just about 4 days ago. But what we need to also understand is how will this impact the way we think in terms of urban planning, in terms of roads, railways, SEZs. How do these come together in a more streamlined fashion? Because what you and I think is a very utopian idea. How difficult would it be to execute in India? And does this budget provide any sort of inkling into that?
No, see, definitely, okay, we cannot go in the past and see why it was not implemented earlier. So I would say better late than never.
Yeah, yeah.
But definitely, it's a very good step, and it's not an easy step. See, for center to possibly liaison amongst the ministries is one thing, but then to integrate it with all the state authorities also, where you have possibly each state having hundreds of authorities, so we are talking about multiple of hundreds. So definitely it's a task to get this done, to get everyone on board, to put each project on the portal, and to basically monitor the progress of each project, so that one knows what is happening when and where. So I think it's a good step in the direction. Definitely, it will change the way how people are investing in infrastructure, and why only infrastructure. A real estate developer can also possibly look at this data and see, okay, if I am planning to possibly invest in a particular location, how is the physical infrastructure or social infrastructure is going to look after 5 years? So it should give a very strong, I think, boost to the overall economy and other allied sectors too.
One thing that also stood out for me in the budget was the way there were incremental funds allocated to the Jal Jeevan Mission. Because if there is a water tap in every house and there is easily accessible water, the impact that it could have, not just on the infrastructure of the country, but also the consumption patterns of the country, with people having more time, more comfort to try out newer consumer products, etc. It could have a big tertiary impact as well. What, in your sense, is the potential to which this can aid our economy?
Yes, see, definitely, I think Jal Jeevan Mission, and it has played out really well even now. If you see over the last 3-4 years, the kind of connectivity of potable water it has provided to households is really great, and water has reached, I think, almost 56% of the villages, or if I recall the number correctly. But still, there is a significant scope and way to go in this particular field. Uh, in terms of investments, what good thing now is that under this Jal Jeevan Mission, and also the other allied schemes that the government is doing, Amrut 2, they had recently revamped that Amrut 1 into Amrut 2 also, where they have further expanded the scope. So we are seeing private sector investment also coming into the water sector, which was earlier not present there. We are seeing HAM models, hybrid annuity models, which is mainstay for the road sector today. is also getting implemented in by water authorities even at the state level, and getting good response from the private sector developers. Why it is happening? Because first, they know that okay, there is a allocation from the center which has happened to this particular project, so their whatever receivables are, they are assured. Secondly, in terms of ROW, etc., it is much lesser complex as compared to a lot of other linear or concentrated projects. And thirdly, it is much less competitive as compared to the other segments currently, like roads or power, which has become very, very competitive. It's a new segment which is picking up, and not many players currently present. So it is really, I think, it's a good story which should play out over the next 2-3 years.
And what do you think is the share of private versus the government in the overall capex of our economy right now, currently?
See, it will be, I think, less than 18 odd percent. And if I have to give you a breakup of how possibly FY23 will look, 7.5 trillion, as you said in the opening remark, will come from the central government. Then similar around 6 trillion one is expecting from the state. That makes it around 13.5. We have CPSCs doing a capex of 3.5 to 4 odd trillion rupees. That will make it around 17 trillion. Then possibly 3 to 4 trillion is what we are expecting to come from the private sector side, and another 2 trillion or 2 to 3 trillion getting plugged by the DFI, the new DFI which has got created. So if you see, out of 22, we are expecting around 3.5 to 4 trillion coming from the private. That's make it around 18% private capex share in the overall scheme of things.
Is there a possibility that this increases given the kind of PLI schemes that have been announced, etc.? How effective do you think those would be in, restarting the capital cycle?
Definitely, and if you go back in history, like in 2008-9, this private sector share used to be as high as 38%, and it has come down very significantly because of whatever has happened in the economy, what has happened with all the PPP projects, etc. So this PLI is a very strong enabler, and now the government is also expanding the scope. Like they started with mobiles, they started with the telecommunications, semiconductors, now in solar panels, modules also they have done that, then pharma. So government is taking all steps to basically enable the investments from the private sector in manufacturing capacities. In fact, you raised a point on SEZ policy also, which I forgot to cover. So SEZ policy also, which is almost 15-year or 16-year-old policy now. So the current policy doesn't differentiate between a service sector and a manufacturing sector company. And that's why we have seen that it has really got very well used and exploited by the service sector, because they are indifferent to the location. They can sit anywhere and start contribute to maybe IT sector, etc. Whereas for manufacturing, it is very important to be very close to their suppliers, to their customers, transportation, maybe proximity to the ports, etc. So now I think this is what government is trying to do, and what budget has also announced. By October, they will come out with a revised policy focusing on manufacturing and combining this with the PLI scheme, so that everything again moves in sync. That yes, government is giving a good support through PLI, and how new SEZ policy can further act as an enabler.
So, what proportion of our current economy, I would assume it's around 11 to 12%, comes in from manufacturing, is that correct?
Yeah.
So what proportion do you think it could be going forward, given this thrust on capex and Make in India, Atmanirbhar Bharat, manufacturing, China plus one factor, all of them coming together? Do you think GDP's contribution from manufacturing will increase, or the entire GDP itself will increase so much that this contribution stays at that 11-12% mark?
See, definitely the growth in manufacturing, one would expect that should be slightly faster as compared to the service sector, because service sector already over the last 2 decades have seen a very strong growth led by ITES. Having said that, ITES is also going all guns blazing, and we are seeing a huge demand, especially thanks to COVID, which has increased the dependence on IT, the security, data security, etc. So My guess is that yes, possibly we may see a percentage or 2 percentage points change in the contribution of manufacturing, but not be very significant because service sector also will grow very significantly, led by financial services as well as the IT ITES.
I track the consumer companies extremely closely, and every management that I speak to, they usually say that we have no problems putting in any sort of capex so long as you can show us the demand. To that extent, do you think this budget has done a little less in terms of giving more money in the hands of people?
Yes, to an extent, yes. Like if you see revenue expenditure, it has hardly moved by 0.9%,
Hmm.
what this budget has estimated for FY23, and which would have given possibly direct money in the hands of consumers through a lot of subsidies and schemes like Manrega, etc., and also through FCI and all. So this budget has focused on creation of capital, capital formation, capital investment, which may have much longer term impact in terms of uh, earning capability, revenue generation, and
Yeah.
overall disposable income, which is in the hand of the consumers. Yes, it may not be a short-term panacea. It may not really help boosting the consumption in various other sectors within this fiscal, but it will have a long-term impact. Having said that, if you just compare, and there have been several studies, revenue expenditure has a multiplier effect of maybe around 0.95, 0.9x, 98x on the GDP.
Hmm.
Whereas capital expenditure, the study says, has a multiplier effect of more than 2 times because there are so many other allied industries which are attached to the capital, this investment sector.
Right.
So overall, definitely it's possibly a good foothold for a stronger future, which we can see. But as you rightly pointed out, not much in the hands of the consumers.
In FY20, it was 1.6% as a percentage of GDP. That's capex that I'm talking about. In the peak between 2002 and 2005, I remember it being above 3%, 3.2%, if I'm not mistaken. This year, it's been projected to be around 2.9. Do you think we have it in us to go all the way up to over 3% and settle around at 3.5%, 4% every year?
And yes, definitely, and that's the need. If we have to really, if we are serious about NIP, even if it gets delayed by a couple of years, that is okay because it's a very, very large program. But settling at this 2.9 may not really help us in achieving the NIP even by 2027. So definitely it has to be increased to possibly at around 3.5% of the GDP because fiscal deficit also has to be controlled. So again, the challenge with the government that they have to maintain a very good balance between the fiscal deficit as well as what they are trying to build on the capex side. And till the private sector investment starts flowing in very rapidly, the burden has to be borne by the government. So, just a short answer to your question: yes, it has to increase to around 3.5% if we have to complete NIP even by 2027. Uh, but at the same time, fiscal deficit path, which the government has chosen to follow, that again will play a very important role on what kind of allocations we will see in the future.
We speak to a lot of foreign investors here on our channel, and they're not as worried about the fiscal deficit so long as the money that is being used is spent, all towards capex as against revenue. Would you have a sense of how these things pan out in other countries? Would you have any sort of perspective on that as against India, which is just about 2.93%? I assume there would be countries much higher than us here.
Yeah, see, if we see what possibly US has done in maybe 1960s, 70s, when they were spending as much as 5% of their GDP, then if we just take recent example of China, what they had done in the first decade of this century, they were spending almost 6% of the GDP. And we all know where China is now in terms of the size of the economy. And now possibly this is our chance to maybe expedite and increase the share of capex. And I totally agree with the view which foreign investors are also giving you, that as long as the money is spent in capital formation and on the right maybe avenues. I think one should not be overly worried with the fiscal deficit, and which we also saw in budget, right? Even there was some slippage from 6.8%, which was budgeted. We are ending at 6.9%. But that was not really maybe bothering the government much from taking this huge capex stance of 7.5 trillion. So I think government has also got similar comfort from the foreign investors.
So what you're basically saying is that the 3.5% that you and I are talking about won't cut it. If you look at the US, if you look at the China, you have to go all the way up to 5 to 6 odd percent. Long way to go there. Let's hope that happens, and let's hope that kind of absorption happens, that kind of execution happens, because what's on paper and in in reality, there is a bit of a slip between that cup and the lip. But if that was to happen, most definitely it would be an impeccable infrastructure driven growth that we would see in our country. And why would the GDP then stop at just 5 trillion, which is the goal? It will go much beyond that as well. Thank you, Shubham. This has been great. So with that, let's go on to getting all our audience questions answered. Ronit Srivastav asks a very pertinent question. What about tier 3 infra sector? What has happened out there?
No, again, if you see, there's a strong spillover effect in tier 3 also, and I think he's talking about the small subcontractors.
Right.
Now, as the overall size of opportunity increases for everyone, so it trickles down. Now, what we have seen, like people or the contractors who were earlier just acting as subcontractors, maybe 6 years earlier, now have assumed the role of mainline contractors, and they are taking projects directly from the authorities. One is that their eligibility has got created because of whatever passport they have done. Secondly, due to COVID, government also relaxed some of the qualification criteria, which though has annoyed larger players because they are seeing a lot of competition coming from tier 2 players now. But at the same time, it is really helping in augmenting the capacity which is required to execute this large plan of NIP. So we will see some competition coming in, maybe creating some kind of disturbances in the ecosystem for some time. But overall, as long as the financial and the bidding prudence is maintained, I don't see a big challenge here. And I think everyone is growing. We have seen very, very small contractors who are becoming now mainline contractors and even bidding for HAM projects. So that's the kind of transformation which has happened in the 6 to 7 year journey.
Right. Another question comes in from Shivratan. He wants to know, how does he benefit from the PLI scheme? Well, we would have liked some more information on that. Is he a manufacturer? Is he a business person? Is he a regular consumer? Because then we would have more specific answers as to how he would benefit. But assume he is a consumer slash regular business person. Not sure if he has a manufacturing capacity, but I will take the liberty of answering on your behalf on this one. Shivratan, if you are a manufacturer, then you would probably be best suited to speak to some expert as to what product does your what category does your product fall under, and would there be a scheme that would definitely benefit you? If you are a person who's just a consumer, well, there will be products which will be made in India, and by virtue of being made in India, they would, one, help your community around you. Secondly, what they would do is that they would cost slightly lower than what it would if it was being imported. And thirdly, more importantly, it would create an infrastructure around you which would give more jobs to people around you, and which will also lead to your business doing well. Because say, for instance, there is a factory in your neighborhood which comes up on account of this PLI scheme, and you are a person who supplies textiles, or you are a person who has restaurants, those factory workers will go ahead and in turn increase their consumption from your business. So it will definitely benefit you. But I'm sure, Shubham, you'll have a little more to add.
Yeah, Mangalam. So I would just say that if he is an individual who is facing a long wait for a car because of shortage of semiconductors, so if PLI scheme goes through and we start manufacturing a lot of semiconductors in the country, that will definitely reduce our dependence on the imports. And not only semiconductors, that was on a lighter note, but overall, as Mangalam has rightly pointed out, definitely if we start manufacturing within the country and we have all the capabilities, definitely our overall dependence on imports will reduce drastically. In fact, we will we may start exporting very soon. We have already started exporting many other critical components.
Right. We have another question coming in. Benudhar Sahu wants to know what are the railway projects, especially in the DFCC? Well, the dedicated freight corridor, everyone's talking about that. Tell me more.
Yeah, so dedicated freight corridor, though it has been marked by a lot of delays, but it's a very strong project, and it will result in reduction in overall time and cost that currently transportation of material through rail takes. So it is a very strong competitor to the entire road network also, because it will definitely provide a better option, better alternative to the entire manufacturing sector in terms of transportation option. So DFCC, there are two links which are under construction, Eastern and Western links. So what we understand, Eastern link, there has been a lot of work and it is about to become operational very soon. Western, there have been slightly more delays. That's why it has not really got operational. Similar to these two, now government is planning other links also to basically enable the logistics across the country network. Other projects that railways is looking for is, like, they had floated tenders to put wagons on annuity basis. Like, what they are seeking is that private sector should come forward and start investing in procurement of wagons, which is a big capital investment for railways on an annual basis. So what they're saying, you come and invest in those wagons, and railways will keep on paying annuities in a regular manner over the next 15-20 years. So we will see a lot of such, I think, new ideas, new ways of attracting private sector capital in railways also going forward.
All right. And the final question of this afternoon, we have Yash Majitia writing to us. He has an interesting question because he says that there is a significant thrust on regional mass transit projects. And on the other hand, there's also heavy capex in roads and highways, which would further lead to increased private transit. Aren't these development philosophies contradictory? What I'll do is I will again take the liberty of modifying this question by saying that these aren't contradictory philosophies; these are corroboratory philosophies. In fact, collaborative, because you would want both, private transit as well as mass transit to go ahead and take place for the economy to grow in a certain way, because you can't be focusing only on public transport and not focus on private transit. And in any case, if you talk about maintaining roads, highways, developing that need not necessarily mean private transit, because most of the highways currently are occupied by trucks and public transport, medium of public transport as well. So I wouldn't go so far as to say these are contradictory philosophies, but I would revert this question to Shubham and say, Shubham, has there been enough done to balance both regional mass transit products and the capex that we've announced in terms of roads and highways and private transport as well?
No, I will definitely allude to the point that you have said, Muslim, that yes, both are. I also see them complementary and collaborative, and that is just the sheer size of the population that we have in the country. So government also have to see that, okay, there are different classes within this population, and where is the dependence of each class on whether a public transport or a private transport, and the way the population has grown. So there has been, I think, a good balance which the government has tried to make. So if we just put metros or railways under the mass transport, the mass transit projects, and if we put roads possibly on the private side. So if you see over the last 5-7 years, the allocation to both have been very, very similar. And focus has been very, very similar, because I think everyone understands that yes, they have to go in parallel, hand in hand, and they will not be competing. Yes, projects like possibly DFCC and expressways, which again is a very large program, that may start competing, and that's what I mentioned also when I was talking about Gati Shakti, that possibly the earlier planning, because of that, like today what we are seeing in NH8, once this Western link becomes operational, a lot of commercial traffic from NH8 may end up moving on the DFC, because it is
Yeah.
cheaper and faster. So that is something which possibly Gati Shakti may help in taking care in for the future projects.
Okay. Before we move on to the optional fifth question that we have right now, tourism, the infrastructure around tourism is something that we haven't discussed this time. They wanted to give hotels the infra status as well.
Yeah.
They were looking at including, tourist spots, etc., or all the infra related to, going into tourism as one of the drivers as well. But I'm not sure if much was announced this year.
Yeah, see, yes, definitely that was one of the wish list items from hospitality industry. So 3 years back, they included the affordable hotels, 3 and 4 star
Exactly.
category,
Remember that. Yeah.
and with the population, I think lesser than 10 million, those cities. They had included that, but unfortunately, that covers maybe less than 6 to 7% of the operational hotels in the country. So tourism directly has not got infrastructure status, and that remains a disappointment. But on the other side, if you see on tourism, definitely government is focused and on supporting this hospitality also. Like they have expanded this ECGLS scheme by around
Yeah.
50,000 odd crores and focused only on hospitality sector. So I think they also understand the pain which this sector has gone through due to COVID. But possibly infra, it may have to wait. This year it was a ton of data centers and energy storage systems. Possibly over the next 1 or 2 years, we may see some action there.
Yes, we will follow the Maslow's need hierarchy theory. Once the social,
Correct.
physiological, all those needs are met, only then we'll perhaps look at the actualization needs. Thank you so much, Shubham. This has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Any final thoughts that you would have?
No, same. I think we are very optimistic about how the things are panning out. Was pleasantly surprised by RBI's today's very dovish stance also that they have taken. I think it will help in further encouraging the capex in the system. And I think enablers are in the right place, intentions are there. Now it's high time that the plan should be put into execution. So hoping for the best.
Hoping for the best, and let's hope that this does unlock credit that we're hoping for. Thank you.
Good. Thank you.